The 100 keeps delivering, and after another action-packed week of matches in both the men's and women's competitions, it's time to sit down and dissect the ins and outs of all 8 teams. Coming up this week, smashed records for the women's tournament and an invincible Oval Invincibles men's side, and we try to make sense of just how good Tammy Beaumont is. All of that in the company of two people who love the 100, Southern Brave fan and our regular Harrison Burridge, and a bit of difference for once on this channel. Blake Bint is joining us for this one to look at everything that has happened this week. We're going to dive straight into it and waste no time and start with the women's competition. Harrison, plenty more close games this week. How does this women's competition keep delivering thriller upon thriller upon thriller?
I don't really know. To be honest, the last week has been kind of off the charts for ridiculous levels of cricket, and especially on the close game front. I guess it links back into points I made last week about how good it is to have the draft to rejig things. It kind of does balance teams out, and it has really shown, albeit some teams who have ended up on the receiving end of the close games should have won it. But for a spectator and a neutral in those games, they have been sensational to watch.
Plenty of stories and plenty of performances. Now, before today and before this afternoon, there were a lot of stories that we could have been talking about perhaps in this women's competition. But after this afternoon's match between the Rockets and the Brave, there really is one place where I want to start, and that is Tammy Beaumont's 118, first century in the women's side of the competition, and for a captain to make this knock at such a vital point in the competition and when the competition's hotting up. Blake, how good was that knock, and what have you made of Tammy Beaumont so far in this tournament?
Yeah, well, firstly, Simon Harrison, thank you for having me on. But yeah, I mean, what a knock it was. Tammy Beaumont, and, a name that's probably been erased from a few people's minds in terms of from England internationals. But I mean, she's been knocking on the door, hasn't she, this competition, and with the captaincy as well. Wildfire suffered a bit of a poor competition as a franchise, not just the women's side, but last year they really struggled. I think there was one win between the men's and women's side combined. So to see a turnaround this year is great, and Tammy Beaumont really proving that she's still got the game at the top level in her.
And she's been vital for this Welsh Fire side. Let's stick with the Welsh Fire then, because they've kept firing this week in terms of their matches, looking like one of the stronger teams in the women's tournament. Harrison, do you think they're going to go to win this tournament, judging off the first 2 weeks?
As I said last week, any side that beats Southern Brave and over Invincibles are going very well. And albeit they lost to the Brave this week, but other results, I mean, that win against Birmingham Phoenix, Chapman Ismail taking a ridiculous hat-trick in the last 3 balls to rescue that game out of nowhere kind of does illustrate how superb some of these games have been. But on a wider point with the teams, the actual team itself, you'd think they're going to be top 3. You'd be amazed if they don't get there, especially when they put a performance in like that today when they're so clinical and dominant over the Rockets side. Whether they make finals day or not, well, that remains to be seen, because it's probably going to be a shootout between them and Brave for top spot to get straight through. And I think Brave, the Fire hold the advantage right now. They're back up at the top, so a couple of weeks to go before we know, but they are in a great position compared to previous years.
They look like one of the stronger teams in the tournament, and I'm thinking week 3 they will continue to gain momentum. Let's turn to some of the other teams in the tournament and who have succeeded this week. And I want to talk about the Oval Invincibles. Perhaps they've had a bit of an up and down start to the tournament, but they seem to be back to their old ways with wins over the Phoenix and the Originals this week. One player who dominated for the Oval Invincibles was Rihanna McDonald, who got 4 for 16s and a 10th win over the Originals. Now, another young breakthrough player, Harrison, I know you wanted to talk about her. What did you make of her, and how good is it for this young stage? We bring it up time and time again. How good is it for these young players to have a stage like the 100 in order to perform?
It's fantastic. I mean, you look around the team, he's got a lot of the England under 19 squad dotted around through these squads, and Rihanna McDonald-Gay's one of them. I mean, the performance from her against the originals was one full of maturity and someone a lot older than she currently is. Mixed up her length, her pace fantastically. Used the slur balls when she needed to, and that brought her the wickets. Bowled a superb line and length as well, and to pull the game back in that way they did was a big boost for Invincibles because it hasn't really gone their way this tournament, but she is a shining light for them at the moment.
Definitely the shining lights. Now, some news that came out of the Oval Invincibles is that Susie Bates is to become captain after Van Niekerk is out with injury. Blake, do you think a change of captain at this point in the tournament is going to be pivotal for the Invincibles' chances?
I think it's got pros and cons. I mean, after not the to this year defending their title, I thought a change up could be handy. Despite the fact they've found some form now, but my only concern is I think what we've seen from particularly the women's 100 over the last couple of years is that key players and the big franchise names really make the difference. Shown mention Ishmael again. Obviously so so dominant last year and played a massive part in the Invincibles win. She's gone to the Welsh Fire and now they're sitting top of the table. I do feel the Invincibles will suffer from Van Niekerk missing out. Still got Bates, still got Cap in there as well as a lot of youngsters coming through. So changing captaincy could see change in direction, but I do I think you have to wonder about what they're lacking in terms of just the ability of Van Niekerk, not only as a captain but as a batter, and she picks up some handy wickets bowling her leg spin as well.
A big loss for the Invincibles then. Now, both of you have briefly touched on Shabnim Ismail, but I think it's worth talking about that hat trick in a bit more detail because Phoenix needed 4 off the last 3 balls, I believe, in that match, and they bottled it. Harrison, I mean, we talked a bit about Ismail last week, but she's been fantastic for the Welsh Fire. I mean, it's just invaluable to have someone on your side who keeps taking wickets at pivotal moments in a game, like the one in the Phoenix game, isn't it?
Yep, it certainly haven't really had for the last 2 years that star name, especially in the pace bowling department of their attack. And I think it's everything pace bowlers dream of. That little spell at the end, I think last wicket hit top of off. It was just a perfect delivery to seal the moment. It just typifies the player she is. She's always there fighting in the moment and wanting to do everything she can to get her team over the line. And the celebrations prove that.
Let's turn then to another big moment in the women's tournament this week, which happened, I believe, about a week ago now, and that was for the Manchester Originals against the Birmingham Phoenix and Fee Morris, who took 5 for 7 in the Phoenix innings, and that was the best ever bowling figures in the 100. A significant moment in terms of the 100's development as a tournament, but also a significant moment for the Originals. Fee Morris has been fantastic, I think, Blake. What have you made of her at the Originals and the Original side as a whole over the course of this week?
Yeah, firstly, I mean, it was a great spell. To get figures like that is a dream of any bowler, isn't it? She's got plenty of experience, and bowling in tandem with someone like Sophie Ecclestone as well is only going to bring plenty of wickets and plenty of bamboozling of batters. You feel one of them's going to get wickets at either end. So she's obviously made a massive impact on the Originals, and they're still in the hunt for those top 3 spots in qualifying for the playoffs. There's plenty of quality in that side, and they've obviously had a good week, and they'll show to push on further, I'm sure.
It's all very close, I think, in this women's tournament, all very much up for grabs. And over the other side of the Pennines, I wanted to say, the Northern Superchargers have charged a bit up the table this week. Two talents I want to talk about, Harrison. First is Alice Davidson-Richards, who took 3 for 23 at the end of the match against the Manchester Originals yesterday, propelling the Northern Superchargers to a win. And then Phoebe Litchfield overseas at 3, continuing to score runs and provide a rock for that Northern Superchargers top order. What have you made of them both, and how significant are they in the side for the Northern Superchargers?
They both hold such importance for how they're going to perform. I mean, we talked a minute ago about Ismail and star quality for any side. Those two are similar. I mean, Alice Davidson-Richards kind of burst into everyone's kind of like area when she scored that 100 last summer in the Test Arena for England women, and a bit of a quiet summer. I don't think she got selected at all for England women throughout the Ashes series, but then coming to this 100 and just lit the stage up. Really, a fantastic performance in the death yesterday to win that game, another close one over the Originals. And then Phoebe Litchfield, I mean, she's been bigged up a lot by the Australian media. She didn't maybe deliver as much as they would have hoped during the Ashes series, but you can tell she's young, she's learning the game, and she's really delivering this tournament. I mean, they lost Alyssa Healy and I think it's Heather Graham on the eve of the tournament, but Litchfield was the replacement for Healy. And I mean, she's come in and made sure they're not really missing her too much. A couple of fantastic knocks, using a full repertoire of sweeps and putting the Superchargers in a fantastic position.
Are they the ones to watch now in this tournament, Blake? Are they going to be charging to hot on the heels of the Welsh Fire?
I think they've definitely got, capability, only 1 point behind, and the game in hand, obviously, with the Fire playing today. I think, like Harrison said as well, though, a side is really going to be judged on how they do against Southern Brave. I think they're a great side, and with plenty of experience at the hands of Anya Shrubsole, that's where you're really going to be judged. So I think if they can maintain that third spot, there is a slight gap between them and the Invincibles, but the Invincibles got plenty of match winning ability in them as well. So if they can keep hold of that third spot or even progress higher, I think they've definitely got a chance to go all the way.
You've touched on Southern Brave there, so let's stick with them. Harrison will be delighted that we're talking about them, no doubt. Wins against the Spirit and Fire this week, including a last ball thriller against the Fire. Spirit, more comprehensive win. Harrison, is the momentum with them now going into the third week?
I'd say yes. I think we spoke last week and said it was an important week for them to pick up a couple of wins. I think we spoke just after they lost to the Fire and bounced back against the Superchargers, but 2 wins. And I mean, it's the captain, Georgia Adams. No, sorry, not the Southern Vipers captain, Georgia Adams, who's really kind of led from the front for the side. You'd say her bowling is the weaker aspect of her game, but I mean, she currently tops the wicket charts for the tournament. So 12 wickets, took a few the other day in that close game against the Welsh Fire, and then went out and hit 40 off, I think, 23 balls in the run chase. That was pivotal in them getting over the line. So a real box office cricketer there that is kind of leading their way in the middle order, an underrated spin option that maybe someone have had on their radar before the tournament.
I believe it was 4 for 11 versus Spirit and 2 for 22 versus the Welsh Fire. So amazing figures. She's having a stellar tournament. Let's look at some of the other teams now who are not doing perhaps as well. And London Spirit are still winless at the end of week 2. Is it all but over for Heather Knight's side, Blake?
I'd think so. I mean, still the game in hand, and there is that sort of tight middle pack. But like I said, the gap between third and fourth looks tricky to overcome at this stage. And when you've been so affected by rain and are unable to get a win on the board, it's it doesn't look likely. It's been a tough year as a whole franchise for London Spirit, but with Heather Knight as captain, as you said, who knows? She's a game changer. I mentioned big stars, and how the difference of the ability and sides all depend on their performances. So, it's certainly a big ask, but I mean, who knows? There's still 3-4 games to go for most of these sides. So, but my instinct says try again next year.
Try again next year. Strong message. Perhaps Harrison, if they can win and cause an upset against the Oval Invincibles tomorrow in the London Derby, can they gain some momentum and just maybe turn this competition around for them? Or is that too optimistic?
I think it would have to be very optimistic because even if they win tomorrow, they're still going to be 4 points off third place Superchargers with 3 games to play, and that's near enough. It is do or die for them anyway, but it is mathematically wise near enough do or die. And you look at their games they got, well, Superchargers in their next game after the Invincibles and the Fire before rounding off against the Phoenix. So if they want to, they're going to have to do it against the best in this tournament. But you can't see it happening. You just doesn't look like they got their team balance right, and a few combinations haven't worked as they would have liked. But as Blake said, back to the drawing board, and they can come back next year.
It's also back to the drawing board for Birmingham Phoenix, I think it's fair to say, because they are sitting 8th now, having won no games and lost 4. Blake, what's not worked for them as a franchise team in the women's competition this year? Where have they gone wrong?
Well, from watching the game against the Oval Invincibles yesterday, I couldn't help but feel, and it was mentioned on commentary, I think they haven't got their roles of people correct this year. Izzy Wong, massive in the England media sort of, and how she's picked up, young and an expressive pace. And she's bowled 20 balls before yesterday, and she only bowled 5 yesterday. So she bowled 25 balls in the whole competition so far, which is next to nothing for someone of such star quality. So I think it's not just down to one player, but I think when you get people's roles right, then you're gonna have success. Maybe trying to overcomplicate things. Just give her the new ball, let her bowl with pace and swing, and at the top of the innings, it's shown to work. The white ball has swung early on. When she comes on middle of the innings, and she's just bowling, looking for an edge, bowling late 60s, 70 mile an hour, but the ball not moving. It's quite comfortable for a set batter to just pick where they want to put the ball, where there's no fielder. So, perhaps it's overcomplication of captaincy, perhaps underperformance of star players as well. But hopefully someone will take a look at that, and next year they'll be stronger.
For these sides, then, Harrison, is it now a case of just trying to get some wins on the board, just trying to entertain for the sake of the tournament, given that they're really out of the running now?
Yeah, they want to finish on a high. They know, well, in Spirit's case, they've been heavily affected by rain. That's kind of ended any hopes they would have had anyway. But for the other sides as well, it's just they want to do well because it's easy to forget when you're looking at this one single tournament. But this is part of a multi-year project as such. So it could be an opportunity to give some other players, someone's on the fringe who haven't played a go, and for others it might be a case of they're playing for their contracts. That's kind of a joy for any sort of cricket, but especially franchise cricket. There's always something to play for, regardless of the situation. Like Birmingham Phoenix, 1 point, 7 points off the playoffs with 3 to play, but they've got several players there, and they want to be trying to find the solution now for next season rather than worrying about that coming the draft.
And franchise cricket just changed quickly, I think it's fair to say. Look at the Welsh Fire, as we've touched on. Finally, then, before we move on to the men's tournament, there's one team we've not touched on yet, which are the Rockets. They're not out quite just yet, but it feels like Nat Brunt has just been carrying them this tournament. 81 off 41 balls via the Spirit this week. Blake, what a summer she is having, but also she's carrying all the weight of the Trent Rockets on her shoulders, I think it's fair to say.
Yeah, I mean, she's an incredible talent, is Nat Brunt. Loads of experience and a very good captain as well. That knock against the Spirit, albeit we've said the Spirit have underperformed, that knock will obviously stand in vain in her side. But then, you've got to look at other areas. I think there's a reason they're sixth, and a lot of that comes from today. I mean, Welsh Fire, Tammy Beaumont, and as much as she's got the talent, it's the first women's 100 century since the competition began, and it came against the Rockets bowling attack. So maybe there's something to look at there. So again, I I can't see them pushing past. If the originals are only one place above them, we've spoke about how good and you know the some of the figures from Fee Morris and the ability of someone like Eccleston as well. If they can't get above them, I can't see them getting above the Invincibles and the Superchargers and so forth.
All the patterns have started to become clear, I think it's fair to say, as we've moved into the second week of the tournament. Let's turn and move on to the men's competition and the men's side of things now. Firstly, just generally, week two, less rain, more games, more close games. Harrison, how do you reflect on what we've seen and the action that has happened?
I think it's just kind of what you just kind of summarised there. The women's competition patterns have emerged. Teams have kind of put their identities out there clearly now, with no rain around affecting things. And it's been like the women's competition, a fantastic watch. Yes, there's been some fashions, but that's been down to the brilliance of one team, often in the first half of the game. But then you still do occasionally have those close ones that really do get the heart going for any fan who loves cricket. But yeah, I mean, like women's, been another fantastic week, and it's a feeling. I get the feeling it's probably the best edition of the 100 so far.
Definitely, I think I'd agree there because I think there's been lots of close games. Return of stars this week, perhaps for the men's side, which has maybe played a bit of an impact. You know, the likes of Bairstow, Wokes, Root coming back in to their respective franchise sides. How good is it to have the star power in these franchises to get people watching these games, Blake?
Yeah, it's obviously really important. The 100, the big aim from when it from when it began was to get bums on seats, get new people enjoying the game, and they obviously took sacrifice, reducing 20 balls and trying to change the format, which to us fans already might seem complicated, but to new fans, they just want to see sixes, they want to see pace, and they want to see wickets, stumps flying everywhere, and people are gonna, these international stars are going to bring that, and Joe Root, an example came to mind. He had a great knock the other day, so it just goes to show that these players do make the big differences to the side, and hopefully, they will get bums on seats, and like you two said as well, I'm in agreement. I think it's the best edition of the competition so far, and hopefully, I dare say it, long may it continue.
Oh, that'll be controversial. I'll clip that one up. Where to start with the men's competition? There's been so many different stories this week. I think I'm going to start, though, by talking about Southern Brave, Harrison, because it feels like they've gone a bit back to winning ways with that comprehensive win over the Welsh Fire on Saturday night. The Welsh Fire, a team who have also been in form. What did you make of their performance that game? Because they were out without skipper James Vince, and they still managed to absolutely thump them.
It was a very refreshing watch because I think we spoke last week. The loss to the Rockets in the first game was not a pretty watch for many reasons, but for them to come out and just the Welsh far side, who some would consider one of the teams of the tournament, just to blow them away at the top with some fantastic pace bowling, albeit favourable conditions, but you still got to execute your skills. And I think executing your skills is exactly what Tyrone Mills did at the death. Not the prettiest hat trick by any means, or most intentional one by any means, but he was executing how he wanted to bowl at the death, and it brought him those 3 wickets. And then it was not. It was good as well for Finn Allen and Devon Conway to come out and get some runs and quickly too, because they haven't delivered, and I think that's kind of hurt the Brave, but just boost their confidence because they're right in the mix for the playoffs now, and they will want to be there after last season's disappointment.
I wrote in my notes that it might have been the most underwhelming hat trick ever from Tyrone Mills, just because it wasn't really box office, but it was a hat trick nonetheless. For the Welsh Fire, then, Blake, it'll be a disappointing loss for them. I mean, I was watching that match at home on the BBC on Saturday, and I almost felt like I didn't recognize the Welsh Fire team that played in that game because it just felt like they didn't fire at all, and they weren't the team that we'd seen in week one.
Yeah, absolutely not. I mean, with Bairstow's return as well, you would have thought they were going to continue their run, and it's a start batter which I think, despite their form in week one, I always thought they were a star batter light. Tom Abel, a great captain, but when you've put all your explosive sort of money into Shaheen Afridi and Harris Ralph, you've got to feel you're going to be lacking at the top, which you would have thought Bairstow coming back would have been quite refreshing. I believe he got a duck. I'm right in saying,
Yeah.
which when you're 87 all out, I think it does show you're a batter light. Yeah, Timon Mills' hat trick slightly underwhelming, and when you think of Mills, you probably think 90 mile an hour, box office Yorkers, toe breakers, and stumps cartwheeling, but not to be. And the Welsh Fire batters perhaps didn't play as they should have. Um, but another thing that will probably be key to note: 4 teams sat on 5 points. Just how important will that net run rate be at the end there?
Definitely, and I was just about to come on to that point in that the Superchargers, the Brave, the Originals, and the Fire all on 5 points at the end of week two. I just want to stick with the Welsh Fire just for 1 minute more because obviously they're going to lose Ralph and Afridi going into this week. We know their replacements are the New Zealanders, but Harrison, we talked about changes mid-tournament and how that can impact a side. Do you think this could spell disaster for the Welsh Fire?
No, purely because Matt Henry lit up the stage for Somerset this year in the Blast. I think probably one of his best T20 tournaments ever for them. And Lockie Ferguson brings that high pace. And if you, the main worry with him, if he goes, where are you with his accuracy? But if that is bang on, then you've got two replacements that aren't actually a big loss for them. It's going to be a blow because, I mean, right from the moment Shaheen delivered his first ball in the tournament, they've been fantastic. And Harris Ralph tonight, I think he's bowled his 4 sets of 5 for 19, which is just fantastic, albeit the Rockets are getting away at the death. But any team that loses those two Pakistan seamers is going to be a loss for them. But Welsh Fire have recruited well to replace them at this late notice.
I think then you can take confidence from that in that Harrison thinks that they're going to do well, so they're probably going to do badly. That's so uncalled for, but I don't care. Let's turn to the front runners in the men's tournaments, which are the Oval Invincibles. 3 wins, 1 loss, 1 tie, 7 points, top of the table. It feels like their loss to Phoenix yesterday was a bit of an upset, Blake. But apart from that, it's hard to find a fault in their side this year. Do you not think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Surrey obviously had a really good T20 Blast campaign. They've got some key players from there playing at the Oval as well. So maybe it's just the good luck charm of the Oval. They've had some really exciting products. Everyone knows what the likes of Sam Curran can do, but Gus Atkinson is one that's a name that's been on a lot of people's lips this year. I think kind of broke through in the Blast, and now representing the Invincibles. He's got a lot of pace. I've heard comparisons to Jofra Archer in his terms of run up, delivery, stride, and all that boring stuff only cricket fans badger on about. He's got a lot of excitement that I think England will look into in years to come. So yeah, they're certainly, you can see why they're front runners. But you are right. The Phoenix have had quite an underwhelming campaign as a franchise. We mentioned the women earlier, and of course the men as well, sitting in seventh. So that could be a setback for them, but I think they've got plenty of star quality to still kick on.
Plenty of star quality to still kick on, but they've also got star quality in names that perhaps we didn't know or talk about before this competition started. And one of those is Spencer Johnson, who took 3 wickets for 1 run on Oval Invincibles' debut this week against the Originals, where they thumped the Originals, by the way. What did you make of Spencer Johnson? Because that's a name I've never heard before. Harrison, sorry.
I mean, wow. I mean, I saw him in the Big Bash over the winter, and all the pundits and obviously guys out there were raving about him. He's been unfortunate with injuries, so he appears young, but I think he's 27, but still very early in his professional cricketing career. And to come over in your first game of the tournament and deliver that, especially when you're bowling to Josh Buttler and Phil Salt up front, I think that was very impressive. And albeit it hasn't gone for him since, he has left his mark on the tournament regardless, and definitely shows sometimes why overseas that aren't the bigger names sometimes hold greater value for size rather than the old names that have always been on the circuit for them.
I just want to add as well,
Yeah, go on.
the Oval Invincibles, this isn't the first time this has happened. I don't know if you remember from last year, their recruitment must be pretty strong because Peter Hatzoglu made his debut for the Invincibles last year, just days after playing some sort of local Surrey League T20. So it's obviously proven successful in the past, hasn't it?
I think if I'm a player and I have an agent, I'm getting on the phone to the Oval Invincibles in the off season and wanting to make my debut because they seem to have a bit of a winning formula. A bit of a blow though for them is that Jordan Cox got seriously injured with that finger injury yesterday. A shame for him given how much he's been firing Blake in this tournament.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, top run scorer in the competition, just pipping Butler by one run currently. Obviously, you can expect him to be overtaken, but yeah, not one who you would have thought would have been top in the run charts at this stage. But you know, he's been proven a good county professional for a fair while now. But yeah, a huge loss for the Invincibles. But you know, with like we said, plenty of star quality, and hopefully they can replace him. But with the loss yesterday, who knows? Could a slump come? We don't know if Cox will be able to play again in the competition, so that could be a big blow.
Very big blow. Let's talk about another team who have finally got off the mark in this competition. The London Spirit got their win. Harrison, is it again? We talked about this in the women's, how they're not having the best of seasons, but is it too little, too late this win for the Spirit in the men's competition and the men's side of things?
Definitely not. I mean, what you spoke about, there's this big group on 5 teams. Rockets could join that group tonight if they win, but then Spirit at one point down that group, and Invincibles tomorrow, who could be rocked off the defeat that you just mentioned. So it's very much a win at the perfect time. Dan Lawrence was superb, delivering everything people hope for from him as a cricketer. And albeit they only won by a couple of runs, but his runs turned out to be crucial, albeit denied. I think it's worth saying by a fantastic piece of fielding from Sam Hain with them. Went and did the even more ridiculous a few balls later to another ball that was travelling over the fence. But for them, Invincibles tomorrow, you just say maybe, is it a must win? It's near in that stage for them because if they lose again, and other teams with they'll be back level on games played after tomorrow. So it's a big one for them. And if Zach Crawley, well, I mean, he goes under the radar a bit, but 30 or 15, he was crucial as well in that win. Him and Lawrence fire again, then it's a kind of a scary prospect for any side.
Scary prospects looking into week 3. Let's talk about the Superchargers now, because this is a team that me and Harrison last week on this show talked about them perhaps being the underdogs and perhaps rising up. And what can I say? They're now in second place. And they've been firing quite a lot. And someone who springs to mind who's done well for them, Tom Banton, 81 versus the Oval Invincible Adam Hose, all-rounder, 42 in that match. It feels like things are starting to click very well for this Northern Superchargers side. Would you agree, Blake?
Yeah, it is, and you know, second in the table shows that, albeit the tight pack with 4 teams as we mentioned. Yeah, I mean, someone you did mention as well, Reece Topley, top in the wickets table currently. Obviously, you know, if injuries weren't against him, then probably would have played a lot more for England as well. And Tom Banton, everyone knows, um, probably one of the most difficult batters to set a field to in England. You know, he's got every shot around the ground and is very explosive, and so is Adam Hose. So when they come off, they're going to turn some heads. So My only concern is, like I mentioned with Surrey in the T20 Blast earlier on, if you play one way and it doesn't pay off, then I feel I feel like you need consistency is what wins you competitions. And if people with firepower like Banton and Hose get out cheaply, that could be costly to their title chances. Um, and still all to play for with so many teams packed in. But if Topley and those two keep doing what they're doing as well, you've got to consider them with the Invincibles having a bit of poor fortune of their own.
Yeah, I mean, they just look, I think, a strong side, and momentum's a big thing in these tournaments. So if they can get the momentum behind them, they should definitely be challenging. One team that won't be challenging, I think it's fair to say, and have had a pretty poor title defense, if we're being honest, and if we look at the results, are the Trent Rockets. Two losses again for them last week. Harrison. I mean, it's their title defense is all but over if they can't win over the Fire tonight. Isn't that true?
It probably is, but then I mean, you look at their two defeats. They've lost by 3 runs and 2 runs, so they're getting it right for the most part. But then faltering in key periods, I think is probably one way to put it. Root's return definitely helped them in that game against Spirit the other day. He played a fantastic knock, but them as a whole, they promised so much in that game against Brave. I think you would fair say similar team to the one that won them last year, but it just hasn't delivered yet. They've got a good score on the board against the Fire tonight with their bowling attack. With Hampshire's John Turner in there tonight, he was a star in the Blast. I just had to get that win in. That was the obligatory mention. But you back them, as Blake said earlier about Welsh Fire not really having too many star names in their backline. You back them to defend that, and then suddenly they're back up on 5, having played 5 games like the rest of the teams in that bunch. And who knows what can happen, because funny things happen in the final few group games of any tournament.
Funny things happened. It's going to be exciting to see who comes out on top, given how close this men's tournament is. Another team that's right up there are the Originals. They had a weird week, I think it's fair to say. Completely smashed against the Invincibles, but bounced back against the Superchargers last night. Is a lack of consistency a concern for you, Blake? And also, I've got written in my notes here, Josh Butler and Phil Salt, perhaps that opening pair not firing as much as the Originals would like at this point in the competition. Do you think the Originals are going to have a good week in week 3?
I think if they can sort of gain some consistency, like you said, then I genuinely think they're going to be right up there with the competition. Butler's someone you always know will play a match-winning knock in an important game. So I think if they reach those knockout stages, he's going to be clinical. Phil Salt, perhaps of the two, has not fired as well. But I think we found a new star of the Manchester Originals in the name of Jamie Overton, who might not produce a knock like 80 off 30 balls or whatever it was every week. But, if you've got that in the locker, which I think everyone has known, Jamie Overton has had that in him for a while, he can certainly make a positive impact as well. And obviously a very handy bowler as well, to go along with the likes of Josh Little, who they have as well. So I think gain some consistency, and I would genuinely be tipping them to win the whole thing. If they keep going in the sort of inconsistent manner in which they have done this week, then rule them out.
It's good as a Manchester Originals fan to hear people saying that. I want to talk about someone else who was a bit of a breakthrough star this week. I think it's fair to say. Again, I didn't hear of him. A Manchester Originals player, Usama Mir, who got 2 for 22 and 32 off 14 to carry the Originals over the line against the Phoenix. We've talked about it, I think, a lot, especially on this men's side of the competition, that it's not always the big names who are making the headlines. It's these newer players who get a chance to shine. What did you make of him this week, Harrison?
He's living the dream as a replacement player. He came in, replaced Michael Bracewell at Worcestershire in the Blast, lit the stage up there. Big part of the reason they got to the quarterfinals. before losing to Hampshire. But in the originals lineup, he came in for Hasarangu, went and played in the Lanka Premier League. And again, he's been influential. I think in his first game, he scored some quick runs with the bat at the end that lifted him up to a total. And then yesterday, 4 for 19, crucial in winning the tournament. He's another one of those X factor cricketers. I think everyone talks about you need a leg spinner on your side. He fits that bill, and he's a leg spinner who can bat and score quick runs at the death, which is a fantastic asset to any side. And he's been a big part of the originals' improvement this year.
I like how you threw in about Hampshire beating Worcestershire. You can't resist, can you? You just can't resist it. It's
The door
bias,
was open, and I walked straight through.
The bias on this is just ridiculous. Someone who no one on this podcast is biased to, that was a tenuous link, but I'm going to go with it, is the Birmingham Phoenix. They upset the Invincibles, but again, they've still not really fired this week. Firstly, Blake, impact of Chris Wokes coming into that side, the experience he will bring as an England player, and he did bring in that win against the Invincibles the other night. How good is it to have him in the tournament?
Yeah, it's really good, and after the Ashes he had as well, hopefully it gets people selling out Edgbaston because Chris Wokes is a phenomenal player, and obviously he played a big instrument in that win over the Oval Invincibles last night. So we mentioned it's really tightly congested. If he can continue doing his stuff, then why rule them out? I mean, obviously 3 teams qualifying for finals day doesn't make it easy, and you can't just rely on one player because Wokes won't show up every game. But obviously he's gonna make a massive part, and the experience he'll bring as well will certainly boost other players to perform, and like I said, hopefully bring some fans in who will make Edgbaston a bit of a fortress for the remainder of the competition.
Now, I'll get crucified if I don't mention Jamie Smith, because Surrey fans will be on my back because they've been banging on about him for a while. But a 60 this week. England talent of the future, Harrison?
He's one that's been raved about, especially for his Red Bull performances on the Lions tour of the winter. He 100 in ridiculous time. Did something similar, I think, for Surrey this year. So and a lot of people are talking him up as the next wicketkeeper batter in the making. So he's definitely there. He's well known, and I think whilst he did more than double his runs in the 100 yesterday with that knock, albeit this is his first season in the tournament, it was one that led the Phoenix to a score that they could defend. They were struggling at one point, but then him and Moeen Ali joined forces and put a fantastic partnership together. And he, like I spoke about Rihanna McDonald Gay earlier, showed maturity beyond his years to steer his side up to that total.
Fantastic. Well, before we move on to look ahead to week 3 and what we can expect from the men's and women's tournaments, I just want to ask finally, due to this pack in the hundreds men's being so close, Superchargers, Brave, Originals, Fire, potentially Spirit and Phoenix in there as well, how important is net run rate? You both touched on it, I think, earlier. And how can teams make sure that they are firing with the bat so that they can be in with a chance? Because it might come down to the finest of margins, Blake.
I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. I think, yes, it's very important. And like I said as well, teams like the Brave, who had a massive win over Wildfire, will obviously be in the driving seat there. But I also think win the game. You get 2 points for winning, you get 0 for losing. You've got to be tied on points for net run rate to even come into play. So, there's no value in winning a game by 100 runs against, bottom of the league, and then losing by 100 runs to a team that's level with you because you're not going to qualify. So, yes, obviously it's important, but I think teams have got to keep it simple, make sure they win a game. And if they do have a chance where they're chasing a total like 88, then you go berserk.
So then let's turn to week 3 and look ahead. Starting with the women's competition, Harrison, can the Brave or the Superchargers go top of the table this week? And do you think the Welsh Fire will continue their dominance?
I think all of those are definitely possible. kind of haven't touched on, Brave and Supercharged both actually have a game in hand on the Fire. They're only a point behind, so they actually be like I said, the Fire, they do hold the advantage now, but in truth, it is the two behind them that have the real advantage, and it's going to be a kind of a fascinating showdown in that department in the next few weeks. You look at it, Brave have got Phoenix, Invincibles, and Originals in their games. I believe Fire Superchargers is the last game for both sides, I believe, in the group stage, and that could well be the difference between who goes straight through to potentially final day or perhaps a practice for the eliminators to come later. But it deserves a great end this tournament. They are 3 teams clear at the top, and I think they're going to give us everything we want.
And as for the men's, we've talked about that tight pack. Blake, do you expect it to get a bit clearer who's going to make it to the knockout stage, or is this going to go right down to the wire?
I mean, we've had just over half the competition now, and nothing has really separated them so far, and I don't see why that would change. I think it will go right down to the wire. Like I said as well, I don't think the Invincibles will be as dominant as they have been, and I think on paper they are probably one of the strongest sides as well. But that injury to Cox will really affect them. So I do expect Superchargers, Brave, Originals to certainly be up there. As much as it pains me to say it, I do think the Fire are the least likely to prevail of those 4 sides. I just think too much change can be a bad thing. Like I said, I really like the Originals, and obviously finding some new talent in Overton with the bat, and also the young leg spinner with bat and ball as well is gonna stir the pot a little bit from outside the top 3 to potentially push in the later stages. So hopefully it goes down to the wire.
One thing I would say about Fire is that they don't have that much of a packed week next week, which could be very interesting. A bit of a break for the players when this transition is taking place. So perhaps that will come into play. Just generally then, Harrison, on the 100 2023 so far and looking ahead to where we're going, any games that catch your eye for next week? Any players that catch your eye at all?
I think it's really a lot of what we've talked about. I think Invincible Spirit tomorrow is a big one for both teams across both competitions, but there's no point going much further than that. Every game is a big game, as we've kind of said, but just seeing the stars keep pushing themselves forward, like so Gus Atkinson that we've mentioned, maybe someone we haven't mentioned, Maya Boucher at the Brave, who's scored 176 runs at strike rate just shy of 145 this year. It's just been I think a fantastic tournament so far of talent being displayed on the biggest stage, and all the teams going toe to toe with each other and able to beat anyone on their day. And I think that's going to lead to some thrilling games as we get down to the crunch time.
Well, I'm enjoying the tournament. I think you two are as well, it's fair to say. Blake, Harrison, thank you very much for your time this evening. And thank you at home for watching as well. If you enjoyed, please do like and subscribe. We will have One Day Cup content coming, I promise you. I'm not just saying that. But we'll also have 100 reviews coming your way again next week. So do like and subscribe for that. But for now, the 100 is still firing and we are still loving.